The wind was cold that evening, and the tall trees of Delta 3's forest moved gently like they were whispering secrets. Rayan, a quiet man in his 30s, was fixing a broken water pump near his wooden cabin. He had lived alone for years, far from the colony base, far from the noise and rules of human settlements. He liked silence, the kind only a forest could give. But then he heard it. A loud boom echoed through the sky, and birds scattered like sparks. Rayan looked up, and through the thick clouds, he saw something crashing down from the heavens. A streak of light, bright, fast, and angry, tore through the atmosphere and disappeared into the trees. It didn't feel like a meteor. It felt different. His instincts kicked in. The old training from Earth's survival corps still alive inside him. He grabbed his cloak, flashlight, and a stun blade just in case. He didn't know what had fallen, but something inside him whispered that it wasn't natural. And so, without waiting, he followed the smoke and heat that rose into the sky. He walked fast, deeper into the woods, his boots crunching fallen leaves and broken twigs. After 30 minutes, he found it. A small, silver alien pod lay in a crater, half buried in dirt and fire. Steam hissed out from broken vents, and strange lights flickered weakly inside. It wasn't military, it wasn't from Earth, and it definitely wasn't meant to crash. Cautiously, Rayan approached, his blade ready. Through the cracked glass, he saw movement, something alive, something small. He forced the hatch open, burning his hands on the hot metal, and pulled it apart. Inside, curled like a wounded animal, was a girl, an alien girl. She looked no older than 16 in human years. Her skin was a soft shade of silver blue, and her hair shimmered like starlight. She was trembling, her lips cracked, and her eyes bright violet fluttered open for a second before shutting again. Her clothes were torn, clearly from the crash, and there was dried blood on her forehead. She wasn't a threat. She wasn't a soldier. She was just a child, hurt and afraid. Rayan dropped his weapon, reached in, and carefully lifted her into his arms. She was light, far too light, and her breathing was shallow. He didn't think, he just acted. He wrapped her in his cloak and started walking back to his cabin through the growing night. As he moved, thunder rolled above and soft rain began to fall. Back at the cabin, he laid her gently on his sleeping cot. He cleaned her wounds using warm water and old medical supplies. She didn't speak, didn't move much, just lay there and watched him with half-open eyes, like a wild animal, unsure if she was safe. He covered her with a soft blanket and lit a small fire to warm the room. Later that night, a message came on his old colony radio. All colonists report sightings of falling debris or unusual activity. Stay indoors and avoid contact with unknown objects. He turned it off without replying. He knew they would come searching. Eventually, and if they found her, they'd take her away, or worse, she was still asleep, curled into herself like a broken bird. He sat in his chair across the room, watching her quietly. She didn't look dangerous, she looked lost. Rayan spoke softly, even though he knew she couldn't understand. "You're safe now, Stargirl," he said, giving her a name until she could say her own. Outside, the wind howled louder. Inside, the fire crackled gently, and the alien girl, for the first time, relaxed her hands. She was still breathing, still fighting, and Rayan, a man who thought he'd seen everything in the galaxy, felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Morning light touched the wooden walls of Rayan's cabin as the forest slowly woke around him. Birds chirped softly, trees moved in the wind, but inside the cabin, the silence was heavy. The alien girl was still asleep, her body half buried under the blanket he'd placed over her. Rayan moved slowly, careful not to wake her, and heated some broth on the fire. He didn't know what her species ate, but it was the softest thing he had. After a while, her eyes opened just slightly. She looked around, confused and guarded, until her gaze landed on him. He smiled gently and said, "Morning, Stargirl." She didn't answer, but she didn't panic either. That, to Rayan, was progress. He brought the bowl of broth to her and offered a spoonful. Steam rose in the air, warm and gentle. She stared at the spoon, then at him. But her lips pressed tighter, and she turned her head away. Rayan waited, then tried again, this time speaking slowly. "Food, see, it's good," he said, pointing to his mouth and pretending to eat. Still, she didn't react. Her eyes were cold, now not angry, but scared, like someone who had been punished before for accepting kindness. Rayan placed the bowl beside her and stepped back. "No pressure," he said softly. "It's your choice." He spent the day doing small repairs around the cabin. Watching her from time to time, she didn't move, didn't speak, and didn't touch the food. When he brought water, she looked at it, and then at him, and again, turned her face. Rayan could feel her fear like a fog in the room. It made his chest ache. Later that night, he cooked some vegetables and rice for himself. The smell filled the air, and he noticed her eyes twitch. She wasn't asleep, just pretending. He placed a second plate on the small table between them. Then he sat down slowly and began to eat. He didn't speak this time, just let the sound of spoons and chewing fill the quiet. Her eyes slowly opened. Her gaze flicked to the plate, then away. Minutes passed, and she shifted under the blanket just a little, but still, she didn't touch it. She looked at him like she was waiting for something. "Maybe permission, maybe a test. Someone hurt you," Rayan said quietly, his voice low and gentle. "You think I'll do the same if you take anything?" The alien girl blinked, but didn't move. "I won't," he whispered. "Not ever." That night, he left both plates where they were, untouched, and lay down on a mattress across the room. The fire dimmed slowly, crackling softly in the dark. The forest outside was peaceful, but inside his heart was heavy. He stared at the ceiling, wondering what kind of place she came from, and what monsters had made her this afraid of kindness. In the middle of the night, he heard something, a quiet sound barely there, like a whisper. He didn't move, didn't sit up, just listened. There it was again, the soft clink of metal. His eyes opened slightly, just enough to see the shape. Near the table, she was standing, wrapped in the blanket like a cloak. Slow, hesitant steps brought her to the plate of food. Her hands were shaking as she picked up a spoon. She looked back at him. He kept his eyes closed, and finally, she brought the spoon to her mouth. She chewed slowly, like she hadn't eaten in days or maybe longer. One bite, then two, then a third. But when she heard a creak from the old floor, she froze. She stared at him again, afraid he'd seen. He didn't move, didn't speak. Moments later, she backed away into the corner again, curling herself tightly into a ball, but Rayan had seen enough. He smiled in the dark. She was still afraid, but not enough to starve. Some part of her still wanted to live. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. He cleaned the plates quietly and made more food. This time, he placed the bowl closer to her and walked away without a word. He didn't look back, but he could feel her watching him, and for the first time since she crashed, he felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't ready to trust, not yet, but she was here, and she was eating. That was enough for now. The forest around them whispered through the trees, and inside the cabin, a silent bond had just begun to grow. 3 days had passed since the alien girl ate her first meal. Rayan didn't push her, didn't ask questions, and didn't expect smiles. He just stayed close, but not too close. He cooked meals, left them near her, and then busied himself with work. She always waited until he turned away before she touched the food. She still hadn't spoken, not a single word, not a sound. But her eyes followed him now, not with fear like before, but with something new, curiosity. It was small, but it was there. Each night, she sat a little closer to the fire. Each morning, she looked a little less ready to run. She had started copying him silently. When he drank water, she would drink too. When he stretched his arms, she would stretch hers moments later. It was like she was trying to learn how to be human quietly. From the shadows, Rayan noticed, but never said anything. He didn't want to break the fragile peace between them. He knew she needed time, but still, he hoped. That evening, the wind howled outside and clouds filled the sky. A storm was coming. Rayan set extra logs by the fire and made soup again. When he turned around, she was already watching him. Her silver-blue face calm, her violet eyes glowing softly in the dim light. He sat down on the floor, a few feet away from her. Between them sat the bowl, warm and full. "I don't know your name," he said softly, "but I call you Star Girl." Her eyes blinked slowly, like she was thinking. Rayan continued, "You came from the sky like a falling star." She didn't reply, but her hand twitched, as if she wanted to. He noticed and gently placed his hand flat on the floor. Palm up, open, not a threat, not a demand, just a gesture. She looked at his hand, then at her own, and slowly, very slowly, she reached out and mirrored him. Their fingers didn't touch, but they were close. Rayan smiled, just a little, then suddenly she spoke. "Why?" she whispered. Rayan's eyes widened. It was one word, barely a sound, but it was her voice. Soft, shaking, but real. He leaned in gently, not too fast. "Why what?" he asked quietly. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling again. "Why help?" she said. Her eyes were full of confusion and something deeper, pain. Rayan didn't answer right away. He looked into her eyes and saw 100 silent screams hiding there. She had been betrayed before, used, left behind. And now she didn't understand kindness, didn't know how to accept it. "Because," he said, "you were hurt." She stared at him, unblinking. "Because I saw someone who needed help." He smiled again. "That's enough for me." The girl's lips parted, but she said nothing more. The fire crackled between them. Rain tapped softly against the window. She looked down at her hands, as if unsure they belonged to her. Then she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Safe." Rayan nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "You're safe here." She repeated the word, a little louder. "Safe." Then looked back at him with something new in her eyes, something almost like trust. That night, she didn't crawl to the corner. She lay down near the fire, still wrapped in the blanket. Rayan watched from his bedroll as her breathing slowed. For the first time, she slept without trembling. And for the first time, he whispered her name aloud. "Star Girl," he said softly. "I don't know who you are, but I'm glad you're here." She didn't answer, but he saw her hand move toward the edge of the blanket, like maybe, in her dreams, she was reaching for something or someone. He hoped it was him. The storm outside grew louder, but inside the cabin, peace had found a way to stay, and in the quiet warmth of the fire, a bond had started to form. It wasn't strong yet, but it was real. The moment her voice trembled, everything began to change. Morning light touched the window as birds sang outside. The storm had passed, but something deeper had changed in the cabin. Ilari, that was her name, now sat near the fire, her legs pulled up, hands wrapped around her knees. She didn't look as scared anymore. Still quiet, still cautious, but the fear in her eyes had softened. Rayan poured water into a cup and handed it to her. This time, she took it from his hand, not waiting for him to walk away. He smiled gently, but said nothing. He didn't want to scare the small progress they had made. She sipped slowly. Like each movement still took effort. He sat down across from her and spoke softly. "Do you remember where you came from?" Ilari looked down, her silver blue skin glowing faintly in the morning light. She shook her head, not a full no, just a small motion. "Pain," she said. "I remember." Pain. Rayan's chest tightened. He didn't ask more. He didn't want to bring the pain back. He just nodded and said, "That's over now." Ilari blinked slowly and whispered again, "Safe." And he replied, "Yes, you're safe here." They spent the day doing little things. Rayan worked on his tools, fixing an old solar battery. Ilari sat nearby, watching, sometimes mimicking his hand motions in the air. She was learning not just words, but actions, habits, human ways. It was quiet, peaceful, and strangely warm. Later, as the sun set and soft orange light filled the cabin, Ilari stood near the small window, her thin frame outlined by firelight. She turned suddenly and caught Rayan staring at her, her head tilted to one side, eyes narrowing. "Why?" she asked. Voice small but clear. "Why look at me like that?" Rayan blinked, caught by surprise. He hadn't expected her to speak like that, not today. Not so directly. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to explain what he felt. But the words came on their own, simple and honest. "Because," he said softly. "You're beautiful." Ilari froze, like she didn't understand the word. Her lips parted slightly, and she looked at her own hands. Her arms, her reflection. In the window, she touched her face slowly, confused. "No," she whispered. "I am." "Not that." But Rayan shook his head and stepped closer. "You are," he said. "You don't see it. Because no one ever told you." Her breath caught in her throat, and she backed up slightly, like she wasn't sure if he was mocking her or being cruel, but his voice stayed soft, calm. "I'm not lying, Ilari," he added. "You shine like the stars you came from." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she turned her back to him and whispered, "On my world, I was not chosen, not wanted." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "They said I was too quiet, too soft, not strong enough to be useful." Rayan stepped closer, but didn't touch her. "Then they were wrong," he said. "They were blind." She looked over her shoulder, eyes wide. "Why would you say that?" He smiled softly. "Because I see what they missed." Ilari didn't know what to say. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She turned back toward the window, trying to understand what she was feeling. That night, she didn't sit far from him. She sat beside him on the rug, near the fire, close enough for their arms to almost touch. They didn't speak, but the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was warm. Rayan handed her a small wooden figure, something he had carved a year ago. It was a star with wings, smooth and simple. She looked at it like it was the most precious thing she'd ever held. She whispered a word in her own language, soft, melodic like wind through trees. He didn't know what it meant, but he didn't need to. Before sleep, she looked at him one last time. "Thank you," she said. Not in her language, but in his, clear and real, and Rayan felt his heart melt. He didn't reply with words, just a nod and a soft smile. As the fire dimmed and night wrapped the cabin in darkness, he listened to her soft breathing, and for the first time in years, he wasn't alone anymore. The morning came quietly, as if the forest itself didn't want to disturb the peace inside the cabin. Ilari sat near the fire, still holding the small wooden star Rayan had given her. She traced its edges again and again, as if it helped her. "Stay calm." Rayan stepped outside to gather wood, his breath fogging in the cool air. Everything felt normal, but that feeling didn't last long. High above the trees, a deep rumble shook the sky. Rayan looked up and saw a black shape cutting through the clouds. It wasn't a bird, and it wasn't one of the colony's drones. It was a ship, dark, silent, and fast. And it wasn't human. His stomach dropped. He dropped the wood and ran back to the cabin. "Ilari," he said firmly. Stepping inside, "We have to hide." She looked up, her eyes wide with sudden fear. She had felt it too, that invisible pull of danger in the air. Without asking questions, she followed him to the back of the cabin. Rayan opened a hidden door in the floor and pointed down. A small cellar lay beneath, cold, dark, but safe. She climbed down quickly, and he handed her food, water, and the blanket. "Don't make a sound," he whispered. "I'll come get you when it's safe." She hesitated, eyes filled with worry, but she nodded and disappeared into the shadows. Rayan closed the hatch and pulled a rug over it. Then he grabbed his tools and sat at the table, pretending to work. His heart pounded in his chest like a war drum. Less than 10 minutes later, the knock came, 3 loud, heavy thumps at the door. Rayan stood up slowly, wiping his hands on a towel. When he opened the door, 2 armored figures stood there. They weren't human, but they wore translator devices around their necks. "Citizen," one of them said, its voice deep and mechanical. "We detected a crashed vessel in this region. You will answer our questions." Rayan kept his face calm and nodded. "I saw a light 3 days ago. he said. I thought it was a meteor. The soldiers looked past him into the cabin. We need to scan your property, the other one said. Rayan stepped aside. Go ahead, he replied. He watched as they moved through the room, checking every wall, every corner. One of them paused near the rug. Rayan's throat tightened. But then the soldier turned away. Our sensors detect no life signs. She is not here, it said to the other. Rayan said nothing, just stood with his arms crossed. After a few more minutes, they left without another word. He didn't breathe until the sound of their ship faded into the distance. Once he was sure they were gone, he pulled back the rug and opened the hatch. Ilari looked up at him with wide, scared eyes. They're gone, he whispered. You're safe now. She climbed out slowly, her legs shaking. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around him tightly. It was the first time she had touched him willingly. She didn't cry, but her grip said everything. She had been ready to be taken again, to disappear, but he had protected her, and that meant something deeper than words. Later, they sat near the fire again, both silent. Ilari looked at the door now and then, as if expecting another knock. They'll come back, she said softly. Rayan nodded. I know, but I won't let them take you, he added firmly. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Why? She asked. Why risk yourself? He smiled and reached out to touch her hand. Because you matter, he said. Because you deserve to be free. She blinked, slowly, as if those words were too big to believe. That night, Rayan worked on something new. He opened old crates filled with forgotten tech scrap pieces. Old shields, broken sensors. He wasn't a soldier anymore, but he knew how to defend. Ilari watched him with curiosity, and then she began to help. She moved quickly with skill, her hands knowing tools he had never seen before. You're not just a lost girl, are you? He asked. She looked at him and gave the smallest smile. No, she whispered. I was trained. But I ran. Rayan didn't ask why she ran. He just said, you're not running anymore. The forest outside was quiet again, but both of them knew it was the calm before the next storm. The search had begun, and this time, they would be ready, together. The night was cold, but inside the cabin, the fire was warm. Rayan sat at the workbench, checking wires and soldering broken circuits. Ilari sat near the fire, silent, holding the wooden star in her hands. She had been quiet since the soldiers left, but her eyes were full of thoughts. Rayan looked up, wiping his hands. You've done this before, he said. She tilted her head slightly. Wiring tools, building. You know more than you show. Ilari lowered her eyes, like she had been caught hiding something. I was trained, she said softly. Her voice was quiet, almost ashamed. Before I escaped, Rayan nodded. Escape from what? She looked into the fire, the flames dancing in her eyes. From them, she whispered. My family, my people, my world. He sat down beside her, giving her space but staying close. You don't have to tell me if it hurts, he said, but she shook her head. You deserve to know. She replied, her voice was steady now. I wasn't just anyone. I was born into the house of Saren. Rayan raised his eyebrows. The name sounded familiar. They are powerful, she continued. One of the ruling bloodlines in the trinary systems. He listened quietly, not interrupting. I was meant to marry a war general, someone cruel, much older. She paused, swallowing hard. I begged them to stop it, but they said it was duty. Her hands clenched the wooden star tighter. I ran on the day of the ceremony, she said. They chased me, shot at my escape pod. I crashed here because my navigation failed. Rayan's eyes softened. And now they're hunting you, he said. Ilari nodded slowly. They don't like being disobeyed. They want to use me, not love me. Rayan clenched his jaw, his voice firm. You're not an object, he said. You're not theirs. She looked at him with wide eyes. No one ever said that to me before. Well, he smiled. Gently, get used to it. The fire cracked behind them, filling the silence with soft sound. She leaned back slowly. Breathing easier now. You should hate me, she said after a moment. Why? He asked. Confused. Because I lied, she said. I hid who I am. Rayan shook his head. You didn't lie. You protected yourself. She blinked, not used to forgiveness. I thought if you knew, you'd send me away. I'm not sending you anywhere, he said calmly. Title or no title, you're still Ilari. Still the girl who held a star like it was magic, that made her smile, a small one, but real. Later that night, Rayan showed her the hidden storage under the floor. It had old armor, weapons, backup power cores. Ilari stared in surprise. You were a soldier, she said. Long ago, he replied. Before I chose peace. But now, he added, I'll fight if I have to. Ilari stepped forward. Picking up a small energy blade, she turned it in her hand like she'd held one before. Rayan watched her. You really were trained, he said. I was supposed to be a tool, she said. A pretty weapon in a golden cage. Not anymore, he said. She looked at him then, eyes searching his face. Why do you care? She asked. You could have let them take me. He stepped closer, voice calm and honest. Because you're not a tool. You're not a prisoner. You're a person. And I care because someone should. Ilari stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something she hadn't done before. She reached out and touched his chest. Just over his heart. Warm, she said. Rayan smiled. Only because you're here. That night, they didn't speak much, but they worked together, fixing sensors, repairing broken armor, preparing for what might come next, because now they both knew the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time they wouldn't run. Not her, not him, not anymore. Together, they would face whatever came, side by side. The sun had barely risen when the scanner lit up red. A large ship had entered the atmosphere. Rayan and Ilari stood in silence, watching the blinking light on the screen. It was time. They both knew it. Rayan strapped on his old armor, dusty and worn but still strong. Ilari wore a lightweight suit, something they had built together from old tech and fabric. She tied her silver hair back, her violet eyes calm but burning inside. There was no fear this time, only choice. She was no longer hiding. They'll land near the clearing, Rayan said. Checking his energy rifle, Ilari nodded. That's where they'll expect surrender. But they're not getting that, he replied. She smiled faintly. No, she said. They're getting truth. The ship touched down with thunder. Shaking the ground, leaves flew through the air, and the forest birds vanished. From the hatch came 5 armored guards and 1 tall figure in gold. The general, his voice echoed through the trees, loud and cold. Princess Ilari, he called. Your people have come for you. Your marriage awaits. She stepped forward. Rayan beside her. I am not yours, she said, her voice sharp and clear. I choose my path. I choose freedom. The general's eyes narrowed. You were born to serve, he said. I was born to live. She answered. He raised his hand, signaling the guards. Take her by force, he ordered. But the guards hesitated. Ilari stood proud, unshaking. She held no weapon, just her voice. If you touch me, she said calmly, you betray our laws. You break the code of the high houses. 1 guard stepped back, then another. They had not expected resistance, not like this. You would throw your birthright away, the general growled. For a human. Ilari looked at Rayan, then back at the general. No, she said. For myself. And if he stands with me, that's my choice. Rayan raised his weapon slightly, but didn't fire. I didn't take her, he said. She stayed. The general's face darkened. You have made an enemy of the trinary systems, he said. Then so be it, Rayan replied. For a long moment, no one moved. Then behind the general, a second ship landed. It bore the mark of the Saren Royal Council. From it stepped a tall, older alien woman with silver robes and glowing eyes. Ilari's mother. She looked at her daughter with both sadness and pride. I watched from orbit, she said. I saw your choice." Ilari stayed silent, unsure. The woman stepped forward, past the general. "This marriage is broken," she said, "by law and by heart." The general tried to argue, but the guard stepped aside. The older woman looked at Rayan. "You sheltered her," she said. "I protected someone who needed me." He answered. She nodded slowly. "You gave her what we never did, freedom." Then she turned to her daughter. "Ilari, you are free to choose your place." Ilari stepped back and reached for Rayan's hand. "I already have," she said. The general was escorted away, his voice fading into silence. The ships powered down, and the tension melted into the trees. Ilari looked up at Rayan, her fingers still wrapped around his. "You didn't leave me," she said. "Never," he replied. Later that night, under a sky full of stars, they sat by the fire again. Ilari leaned against Rayan's shoulder, her eyes watching the flames. She whispered, "Why are you looking at me like that again?" Rayan smiled. "Because you're beautiful," he said softly. She didn't look away this time. She smiled back. "I believe you now," she whispered. They stayed there in silence, two souls from different worlds. But in that moment, there was no galaxy, no war, no titles, just one truth. That sometimes, love begins when someone simply stays.